Jack gazed at the endless expanse of space from his makeshift shelter on what remained of Earth's moon. The stars were his only companions since the cataclysm that wiped out humanity. His days were spent scavenging through abandoned lunar bases, his nights filled with haunting memories of a world that once was. He could not recall the last time he had spoken to another living soul. Silence had become his constant companion, and loneliness his shadow. The moon's surface was barren and lifeless. Jack's shelter, a repurposed storage unit from an old mining colony, was barely enough to keep him alive. Inside were scattered relics of human ingenuity, oxygen recyclers, solar panels, and a dwindling supply of rations. He kept himself busy with routine repairs, but each day felt like a repeat of the last. He often looked to the stars, wondering if anyone else remained out there. One evening, as the twin suns of Sol dipped below the horizon, Jack stood outside adjusting the solar panels on his lunar rover. The cold vacuum of space seeped into his bones despite his well-worn survival suit. He muttered to himself as he worked, his voice breaking the eerie stillness of the lunar landscape. That should do it. One less thing to worry about, Jack said aloud, more for the comfort of hearing his own voice than anything else. Suddenly, the ground beneath him trembled slightly. Jack froze, glancing around for the source of the disturbance. The moon was still, its surface as lifeless as always. He shook his head, dismissing it as a small quake. But then the sky lit up. A bright beam of light erupted from above, encasing him in a warm glow. Jack squinted, shielding his eyes as the light grew brighter and brighter, until it engulfed everything around him. He felt weightless, his body lifting off the ground as the rover and shelter disappeared from view. Panic surged through him, but before he could cry out, everything went black. When Jack opened his eyes, he was no longer on the moon. The air felt different, softer and warmer, as though it carried a faint hum. He lay on a smooth surface that shimmered faintly under a light that seemed to come from nowhere. The walls around him were iridescent, shifting between colors like an oil slick. Strange symbols floated across their surfaces, disappearing and reappearing in hypnotic patterns. Jack sat up slowly, his head spinning. "What the hell?" he muttered, rubbing his temples. His survival suit was gone, replaced by a lightweight tunic of an unfamiliar material. He patted himself down, trying to find something familiar, but came up empty-handed. "Greetings, human," a melodic voice rang out. Jack turned sharply, his eyes widening as he took in the figure before him. She was tall and slender, her skin shimmering with a teal hue that seemed to glow softly in the dim light. Her eyes radiated a luminescent golden light, and intricate patterns covered her exposed arms and neck. She wore a flowing garment adorned with particles that sparkled and floated around her as though defying gravity. "Who are you? Where am I?" Jack demanded, stumbling to his feet. The woman inclined her head in a graceful motion. "I am Seren, matriarch of the Zephyrians. You are aboard our vessel, the Celestial Harmony." Jack backed away, his hands instinctively raised in defense. "Why have you taken me? What do you want from me?" Seren regarded him with a calm expression, her golden eyes studying him as though he were a curious artifact. "You are the last of your species, are you not?" Jack hesitated, a knot forming in his chest. "As far as I know, yeah. But what does that have to do with you?" Seren stepped closer, her movements fluid and deliberate. "The survival of our kind depends on diversity. Without it, we will cease to exist. You are the last of your lineage, the final key to restoring balance to our people." Jack blinked at her, his mind racing. What does that even mean? What balance? What key? "Look, I'm just a guy trying to survive." Seren's lips curved into a faint smile. "You will understand in time. For now, rest. The rituals of renewal will begin soon." Jack stiffened, his fists clenching at his sides. "Rituals? What rituals? I didn't agree to any of this." Seren tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "You will see that resistance is unnecessary. The Luminar will guide you." Before Jack could respond, the walls of the chamber pulsed faintly, and Seren turned, walking toward a doorway that appeared out of thin air. The sparkling particles around her seemed to dance in her wake. Jack took a step forward, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "Wait a damn second, I need answers. Where are you going?" Seren paused, glancing back over her shoulder. "Rest, human. Tomorrow your journey begins." The door closed seamlessly behind her, leaving Jack alone in the shimmering room. He paced back and forth, his thoughts racing. He had no idea who these Zephyrians were or what their rituals entailed, but he had a sinking feeling he wasn't going to like it. He stopped near a wall, pressing his hand against the cool surface. The symbol shifted under his touch, glowing faintly as if responding to him. "What have I gotten myself into?" he muttered, his voice echoing softly in the empty chamber. Jack woke to the faint hum of energy coursing through the walls of his chamber. The strange symbols glowed softly in the dim light, shifting and pulsing as though alive. He sat up groggily, the events of the previous day flooding back into his mind. Abduction, aliens, rituals. None of it made sense, and yet here he was, trapped on a shimmering alien vessel with no way out. Before he could gather his thoughts, the doorway reappeared in the wall with a fluid motion. Seren stood there, her glowing eyes calm and steady. Behind her was a taller Zephyrian with violet-hued skin and angular features. He carried a staff that emitted a faint rhythmic hum. "Rise, human," Seren said, her tone as melodic as ever. "Your preparations begin today." Jack scowled, his arms crossed. "Preparations for what exactly? I still don't know why I'm here or what you expect me to do." Seren gestured gracefully for him to follow. "All will be revealed. Come." Jack reluctantly followed her through the doorway, his bare feet sinking slightly into the soft, glowing floor. The corridor was vast and seemingly endless, its walls lined with patterns that shifted like liquid light. Other Zephyrians passed by, their teal and violet forms shimmering faintly. Each one glanced at him with a mix of curiosity and amusement. "So," Jack began, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "am I supposed to be some kind of savior for your people or just a science experiment?" Seren didn't break her stride. "You are neither. You are a participant in our rituals of renewal, a sacred tradition that ensures the survival of our kind." "And what do these rituals involve?" Jack asked, narrowing his eyes. She paused, turning to face him with a faint smile. "You will see." They entered a massive chamber that left Jack momentarily speechless. The space was circular, its walls alive with shifting colors that reflected onto the floor like an endless pool of light. At the center was a raised platform surrounded by floating orbs emitting soft, glittering particles. Dozens of Zephyrians gathered around, their luminous eyes fixed on the scene. "What is this place?" Jack asked, his voice quieter now. "This is the Hall of Luminar," Seren said. "Here, we prepare for the trials that will determine compatibility." "Compatibility for what?" "For the continuation of our lineage," she said simply. Jack's stomach twisted. "You mean, you're looking for a mate?" Seren tilted her head. "That is one way to describe it." Before Jack could respond, another Zephyrian stepped forward. She was taller than Seren, her features sharper, her skin a deep violet. She carried an air of authority, her piercing eyes locking onto Jack. "I am Leora, keeper of the trials," she announced. "The rituals of renewal are not merely about procreation, they are about strength, unity, and balance. To be chosen is an honor, but it must be earned." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Earned? You mean I have to qualify for this? I didn't even sign up." The gathered Zephyrians chuckled softly, their melodic laughter filling the chamber. Leora's expression remained stoic. "Your trials begin now. Prepare yourself." "Prepare myself for what exactly?" Leora stepped aside, revealing a series of platforms rising from the floor. Each one was covered in glowing particles that shifted and danced like fireflies. Seren gestured for Jack to step forward. "Your first trial is one of adaptation," she said. "You must prove that you can move in harmony with the Luminar." Jack blinked. "What does that even mean?" Seren's faint smile returned. "It means you must dance." Jack froze, his mouth falling open. Dance? You've got to be kidding me. Leora raised her staff, and the floating orbs began to emit a rhythmic hum. The floor beneath Jack's feet lit up, glowing with patterns that pulsed in time with the music. This is ridiculous, Jack muttered, glancing around at the watching Zephyrians. I'm not a dancer. Then learn quickly, Seren said. The Luminar responds to movement. Let it guide you. Jack hesitated as the music swelled, the glowing patterns on the floor urging him forward. The Zephyrians watched silently, their glowing eyes expectant. Jack took a deep breath, muttering under his breath, Fine. Let's get this over with. He stepped onto the platform, his movements awkward and hesitant. The glowing particles swirled around him, reacting faintly to his steps. The Zephyrians murmured among themselves, their expressions a mix of amusement and curiosity. You must move with purpose, Leora called out. The Luminar will not respond to uncertainty. Jack gritted his teeth, his frustration bubbling over. Easy for you to say. This isn't exactly my thing. Serene stepped forward, her voice calm and encouraging. Close your eyes, Jack. Feel the rhythm. Let the song guide you. Jack hesitated but did as she said. The hum of the Luminar filled his ears, a strange, soothing melody that seemed to resonate in his chest. Slowly, he began to move, his steps becoming more fluid. The glowing particles responded, swirling around him in intricate patterns. The Zephyrians watched in silence as Jack found his rhythm. His movements grew bolder, the Luminar's light reflecting off his every step. When the music reached its crescendo, Jack spun on his heel, the glowing particles forming a cascade of light around him. When the music stopped, the chamber fell silent. Jack stood in the center of the platform, his chest heaving, his face flushed. The Zephyrians exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. Serene approached him, her golden eyes warm. Well done, Jack. The first trial is complete. Jack ran a hand through his hair, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Great. What's next? Karaoke? Seren smiled faintly. Rest now. The next trial will come soon. As the Zephyrians dispersed, Jack sat on the edge of the platform, his mind racing. He had no idea how he would survive the next trial, but one thing was clear. He was in far deeper than he had ever imagined. Jack sat on the platform long after the Zephyrians had left the chamber, his head buried in his hands. The glowing Luminar particles around him pulsed faintly, like embers of a dying fire. The first trial had been humiliating enough, but the uncertainty of what lay ahead gnawed at him. The door to the chamber dissolved, revealing Serene's glowing figure. Her movements were as graceful as ever, her golden eyes steady as they locked onto him. Jack, she said softly. The second trial begins now. Jack groaned, pushing himself to his feet. You could at least give me time to recover. I'm not built for whatever all of this is. You are stronger than you think, Seren said. Follow me. Reluctantly, Jack followed her down a winding corridor that seemed to stretch endlessly. The ship's walls glimmered with their usual surreal glow, the air filled with a faint hum that Jack now recognized as the ship's constant, soothing presence. When they reached their destination, the door dissolved to reveal an arena unlike anything Jack had seen before. The space was vast, circular, and encased in a transparent dome that offered a breathtaking view of the stars beyond. The floor shimmered with faintly glowing patterns that shifted like liquid light. At the center stood a tall, imposing Zephyrian clad in intricate armor that sparkled like crushed gemstones. Meet Leora, Seren said. She will be your opponent for the second trial. Jack blinked, taking a cautious step back. Opponent, you mean we're fighting? Indeed, Leora said, her voice sharp and commanding. The second trial tests resilience and adaptability. You must prove that you can face adversity with strength and ingenuity. Jack threw up his hands. I'm just a guy from Earth. I don't have super strength or fancy glowing armor. How is this remotely fair? Seren stepped closer, her gaze calm. The Luminar will guide you. Trust in it, as you did before. Jack glanced at the shimmering patterns beneath his feet. Great. Glitter magic. That'll really help me when she's bashing my head in. Leora raised her staff, its twin blades glowing with an otherworldly light. Prepare yourself, human. The trial begins now. The first strike came faster than Jack could react. Leora moved with lightning speed, her staff whirling through the air in a blur of motion. Jack ducked instinctively, the weapon missing his head by mere inches. He stumbled backward, his heart pounding. Seriously? He shouted. You didn't even give me a chance to. Leora's second strike cut him off, forcing him to roll awkwardly to the side. The crowd of Zephyrians that had gathered around the arena murmured in amusement, their glowing eyes fixed on the spectacle. Jack scrambled to his feet, raising his fists defensively. Okay, think, how do you fight someone with a magic glowing stick when all you've got is your wits? As if in response to his thoughts, the luminar particles around him began to shift, their light intensifying. The patterns on the floor pulsed rhythmically, matching the pounding of his heart. Jack felt a strange energy coursing through him, a subtle but unmistakable presence guiding his movements. Leora lunged again, her staff spinning in a dazzling arc. This time, Jack sidestepped smoothly, the luminar particles swirling around him in a protective dance. He grabbed a handful of the shimmering dust and hurled it into the air, creating a blinding cascade of light that momentarily disoriented Leora. The crowd murmured louder, their expressions shifting to surprise and intrigue. Leora recovered quickly, her glowing eyes narrowing. Clever. But not enough. She advanced again, her strikes faster and more precise. Jack ducked and weaved, each movement guided by the luminar's subtle rhythm. He found himself reacting before he even had time to think, his body moving as if in harmony with the energy around him. Finally, as Leora brought her staff down in a powerful overhead swing, Jack sidestepped and grabbed the weapon's shaft. Using her momentum against her, he twisted it out of her grip and sent her sprawling to the ground. The crowd erupted into cheers, their melodic voices filling the arena. Jack stood over Leora, breathing heavily, the staff clutched tightly in his hands. Leora looked up at him, a faint smile tugging at her lips. You are full of surprises, human. Jack offered her a hand, helping her to her feet. Yeah, well, I'm full of something. Seren stepped into the arena, her golden eyes filled with approval. You have done well, Jack. The second trial is complete. Jack handed the staff back to Leora, his body aching but his spirits slightly lifted. What's next? Juggling flaming swords? Seren smiled faintly. Rest now. The third trial will come soon. That evening, Jack sat alone in his chamber, staring out at the stars through the translucent walls. The faint hum of the luminar filled the air, a constant reminder of the strange connection he was beginning to feel with this place. He didn't know what the third trial would bring, but for the first time, he felt a spark of confidence. Maybe, just maybe, he could survive this. Jack awoke to the now familiar hum of the luminar, his body still sore from the combat trial. He sat up slowly, rubbing his temples as the events of the previous day came rushing back. The dance, the fight, the glitter. It was like some fever dream he couldn't escape. Before he could dwell on it for long, the chamber door dissolved once again, revealing Seren's serene figure. Her golden eyes seemed brighter today, her expression calm but tinged with something Jack couldn't quite place. It is time for the third trial, Jack, she said softly. Jack sighed, swinging his legs over the edge of the bed. Let me guess, tightrope walking over a pit of glowing sand, or maybe underwater synchronized swimming with space dolphins. Serene's lips curved into a faint smile. This trial is different. It does not test your physical abilities, but something far deeper. Jack raised an eyebrow. Deeper how? You will see. Follow me. Reluctantly, Jack stood and followed her through the shimmering corridors of the celestial harmony. The ship's bioorganic walls pulsed faintly with light, the luminar particles swirling like tiny galaxies in the air. Jack had stopped trying to make sense of it all. This was their world, their rules, and he was just along for the ride. They entered a new chamber, smaller and more intimate than the others. The walls glowed softly, casting a warm amber light that reflected off the smooth floor. At the center of the room was a low platform surrounded by floating orbs of luminar dust, their movements slow and deliberate. Kaya stood on the platform, her violet-hued skin shimmering faintly. She wore a simple yet elegant garment that seemed to flow like liquid light. Her violet eyes locked onto Jack as he entered, and she offered him a slight nod. "Kaya will guide you through this trial," Saren said, stepping aside. "It is a test of connection, of understanding and trust." Jack frowned, crossing his arms. "Connection? What does that even mean?" Kaya stepped forward, her movements fluid and graceful. "In our culture, connection is sacred. It is the bond that unites us, the foundation of all we are. To be chosen in the rituals of renewal, you must demonstrate your ability to connect, not just with words but with your essence." "My essence?" Jack repeated, his tone skeptical. "What does that even mean?" Kaya smiled faintly. "Sit with me, Jack." He hesitated but eventually moved to the platform, sitting cross-legged across from her. The orbs of luminar dust floated closer, their soft glow intensifying. Kaya placed her hands on her knees, her gaze steady. "Close your eyes and breathe. Let the luminar guide you." Jack rolled his eyes but complied, closing his eyes and taking a deep breath. The air around him felt different, heavier yet soothing. The faint hum of the luminar grew louder, resonating in his chest like a heartbeat. "Now," Kaya said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Clear your mind and listen. What do you feel?" Jack focused, the hum of the luminar filling his thoughts. At first, he felt nothing but the ache of his body and the lingering frustration of his situation. But then slowly, something shifted. He felt a warmth spreading through him, a gentle pressure that seemed to surround him like a cocoon. "It's warm," he said finally, "like a soft breeze." "Good," Kaya said. "Now reach for it. Let it guide you." Jack frowned but reached out with his mind, unsure of what he was doing. The warmth grew stronger, and he felt a strange pull, as though he were being drawn toward something, or someone. Suddenly an image flashed in his mind. He saw Kaya, not as she was now, but as a child, her violet skin glowing faintly as she played among fields of shimmering luminar dust. The joy on her face was palpable, a deep, unfiltered happiness that tugged at his heart. What is this?" Jack asked, his voice trembling. Kaya's voice was soft. "It is a glimpse of who I am. The luminar connects us, allowing us to see beyond what words can express. Do you understand now?" Jack opened his eyes, his breath shaky. "I think so. But what does this have to do with your rituals?" Kaya reached out, her hand hovering just above his. "Connection is the foundation of our survival, Jack. Without it, we are nothing. This trial is not just about us. It is about what you can offer, what you can share. Will you let the luminar guide you?" Jack stared at her hand, his mind racing. He had spent years alone, walls built around his heart to protect himself from the crushing weight of loss. But now, here in this strange, glittering world, he felt those walls begin to crack. Slowly, he reached out, his hand brushing against hers. The luminar swirled around them, its glow intensifying as their connection deepened. Jack felt a surge of emotion, fear, hope, longing, all blending into something he couldn't quite name. Kaya smiled, her eyes soft. "You are stronger than you know, Jack." The trial was complete.